What's up, guys? Once again, a back-to-back video. There's another trade that happened today. Ben Chiarot has been traded to the Florida Panthers.
So we literally just finished
We
recording.
just spoke about it. They're going
We-
if they don't get Claude Giroux, Ben Chiarot is most likely the case. And
Bro, well,
look what just happened.
it's like we spoke it into existence. It's like we said this is what's gonna happen, and then Kent Hughes was like, "Oh, all right, okay, I guess we're gonna just trade." So Ben Chiarot going to the Florida Panthers. The full deal is Ben Chiarot 50% retained of his salary, so $1.75 million going to the Florida Panthers. In exchange, the Canadiens acquire B prospect Ty Smilanic, who is a NCAA forward, a fourth-round pick in 2022, which is actually the Rangers pick. So the Rangers pick that just got traded to Florida for Frank Vetrano is going to Montreal now in that deal, and as well a 2023 first-round draft pick in next year's draft. So Ben Chiarot is a Florida Panther. What do you think of this deal, Chris, so far?
Listen, I think it's exactly what I wanted to happen, and we got exactly what I wanted. So, I can't complain. As a Habs fan, we got exactly what we needed. We got a B-level prospect. I'm not too familiar with him. I don't know if he's gonna ever I don't think he's gonna be like an insane elite player, but because I've never really heard of him.
Yeah.
We got a first round pick for next year, which is great because next year's draft like we're saying.
It's also unprotected, meaning if Florida misses which means if Florida misses the playoffs next year, that pick could be a lottery pick, which I don't think they will, but you never know.
Well, let's pray. That's
it. You got to pray now.
You never know. But it's crazy. It's a crazy deal, and now I'm just, if I know Jacob Chikrin's like off the market, but you never know what could happen. But listen, if this was
on Giroux, so
if this was the price for Ben Chiarot, a player like Giroux or Jacob Chikrin, it could be going for a hell of a lot more.
Wow, so, what a move! And I mean, look, if you're,
I'm surprised though. I'm surprised they retained salary though.
Well, I think that was to kind of, to spice the deal up a little bit. I think the Florida Panthers were like, hey, we'll give you a fourth-round pick if you retain salary. And Montreal's like, all right, more picks. All right, cool. But I'm happy with this deal. I think, for Montreal, like you mentioned before, like you said before, they get themselves a first-round pick. They get themselves a B-level prospects, and they get themselves an additional asset in the fourth-round pick. Ben Chiarot, warrior of the Montreal Canadiens, really good servant when he was here. Fantastic. Did a lot of good things in the playoffs. Florida's getting themselves a monster in the playoffs. This guy is going to hit everything that moves. He's pretty responsible defensively. If you put him next to a guy like, next to another pretty big body defenseman, maybe a guy like Aaron Ekblad or a guy like Radko Gudas, that could be something to really look at if you're Florida. But they get themselves a fantastic defenseman. Yes, a lot of Habs fans, if you see and if you watch the Canadiens or if you've paid attention to the Canadiens over the last a little while, you see some Habs fans complain about him. Look, to be honest, the whole team this season has kind of struggled, and Ben Chiarot's been kind of the bright spot for this team in some cases. And, we knew this deal was coming. Kent Hughes, when he came in, pretty much confirmed that the Habs were pretty much going to trade him. It was just a matter of
I think he said it. He said it not so long ago. He's like he's getting traded within the next 2 weeks.
He basically confirmed it. He was like, listen, we're trading him. We're going to listen to offers, but he's going to get dealt before the trade deadline. And he did. And you know what? Fantastic move by the Canadiens and fantastic move by the Panthers. This is a win-win for both teams at the moment. This Ty Smilanic, third-round pick in 74th overall in 2020. So recent draft pick, which is good. He's 20 years old. He's in the second season of the Quinnipiac University team. 22 points in 38 games. Not fantastic, but again, it's prospect and it's assets and it's trade value and it's players that that you can always move and flip for other players in the future if you want. But it's another prospect coming back to Montreal. It's another young guy who you've seen a couple of years in whatever. And Montreal again, they do exactly what they need. They acquire themselves a first round pick. They acquire themselves a prospect, and that first round pick, man. Look, I don't know if Florida. I think Florida is going to be a good enough team next year to make the playoffs. But if they don't, make the playoffs, that's a lot. That could be a lottery pick. And we're talking about potentially having a lottery pick for Ben Chiarot next year if that happens. I'm not saying it will.
Potentially a Montreal lottery pick too, because I mean, who knows if
that's it.
We're going to be winning next year.
That's it. And I think, look, if you're a Canadiens fan, like you've been waiting for this deal for a long time, and like Habs fans have been impatient about this. Since Toffoli got traded, they were like, okay, who's the next one up? And then they were like, oh, crap, okay, no deals for a while. And now you see Ben Chiarot and Ben Chiarot getting traded, and Habs fans on Twitter are going crazy. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And I don't think the Canadiens are done yet. I really don't. I think there's still a couple of other pieces being done. But talking about Ben Chiarot, Florida fans, if you guys are not familiar with him, let me just give you a little rundown. He's a big body defenseman. He's not bad offensively. Look, he's more of a defensive defenseman, but this year he's had a little bit more points. But he's a guy who's going to play in the playoffs. He's going to be a playoff performer for you guys. And Florida fans especially get excited because this guy in the playoffs especially, man, you saw it in the series last year against the Leafs, against the Jets, and even against Vegas and against Tampa to some extent. This guy's a machine if you play him with the right players. So I think Florida's getting themselves a fantastic piece there. For Montreal, I mean, again, it goes back to just what a trade, man. I'm really happy for both teams here, but especially if, as a Habs fan, seeing a deal like that, it reassures me for the future that, okay, this team's going in the right direction and they know exactly what they're trying to do.
So, I mean, now that Chiarot's been traded, I mean, do you see any other players potentially leaving from the Montreal Canadiens? I know they're mentioning Mike Hoffman as a potential guy to most likely move. They were saying Lehkonen, but I think now he's most likely going to be staying with the team.
I think, look, I mean, I'll be honest with you. Lehkonen's still a real possibility. The reason why I think that is because I think there's a lot of interest in him. And I think at some point, if a first-round pick in this year's draft comes in, I think you have to look at it. But I think for the Canadiens, they have a lot of decisions to make between now and then. We're only Wednesday. Trade deadline's on Monday. I do think there may be some depth pieces being moved. Maybe a guy like Wideman, maybe a guy like Matthew Perreault, who was placed on waivers today as well. A few guys like that may be able to get some extra draft picks. But I know that Montreal's also been looking at some assets. We've looked at. There's been rumors about them potentially being in on Jack McBain from Minnesota. A university player. They've been interested in Pavel Zacha maybe. So the Canadiens, I think, are still going to be very, very active going into this trade deadline. I don't know exactly what they're going to do. I don't know if Mike Hoffman's going to get traded. I don't know if Lehkonen's going to get traded. I have an assumption that I think they will. But you never know, man. I mean, Kent Hughes, he's a really unpredictable guy. Nobody expected Tyler Toffoli to get traded when he did, and he did. So I think, at the end of the day, I think anyone apart from Caulfield, Suzuki, and Romanov are pretty much accessible to get traded. So I don't know what's going to happen with the Canadiens. Maybe a guy like Jake Allen, since he's coming back tomorrow and the teams are looking for goaltending, maybe a team looks at Montreal and says, hey, what do you want for Jake Allen? So I don't know what the deal is going to be there, but if Montreal can definitely make that move, it could definitely happen. So,
I'd like to see two people being moved from the Montreal Canadiens. I mean, some people might disagree with me on one of them. I think Savard is a guy they have to try to move, I would say. Yeah. He's not playing well here. His contract it's movable. And, I think there's some teams that are still looking for defensive depth. And, I think he'd be, great elsewhere. It just wasn't a fit here in Montreal. And another guy, and this one's quite controversial, but I think Jonathan Drouin should be someone that the Habs consider moving to maybe try to get like a big piece or, another number one pick. So,
well, I think those are guys that are definitely. I think Drouin is one that I'm not so sure. And you're naming guys that are out of the lineup right now, but I think there's one that's a real possibility that I think could really happen. Is a guy like Mike Hoffman. I mean, he's turned into.
Kulak too. If I'm not mistaken, you mentioned that in another video.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that could maybe draw some interest from some teams. I don't know how high the asking price would be, but he's a guy that maybe gets moved. But for me, I think a guy like Mike Hoffman could be a guy as well to look at because, a lot of teams in a lot of depth scoring, and we look at a team like Pittsburgh who is looking to add in that department, and I think Mike Hoffman could be a great fit over there. So maybe the Habs look at that and say, oh, we're going to trade Mike Hoffman. But in terms of Florida, and I want to get to Florida a little bit because Obviously, we talked about them acquiring Ben Chiarot, but they just retained. They just went to go trade Frank Vatrano in that deal with the Rangers. They then go and acquire Ben Chiarot, and now there's still potential rumors that they're still in on Claude Giroux. And my question to you is, now that we know that Florida got rid of both their first round picks, what's if they go after a guy like Claude Giroux next after just acquiring Ben Chiarot, what's the trade going to be? Like,
I think it's Lundell.
You think so?
I think so. He's the only thing that a GM would be like, you know what, you don't have picks. Lundell is or Spencer Knight. Philly and Connor Hart, I don't. It's it's kind of a shaky relationship between the two, and I think Spencer Knight could help out their goaltending future since they seem to be hesitating on Connor Hart. I feel so. Tippett is for sure getting thrown into this deal.
Yeah, but I think look, it obviously for Montreal.
Sorry, but who knows? Maybe they could give up 3 first-round picks, in the next 3 years. It's a possibility.
Well, I think here's the other thing too. A lot of Canadiens fans, and like they're not too familiar with Tyler Smilanic. I'll be honest with you, I'm not too big on him either. I don't really know much about him, but what I do know is, he was liked by a lot of scouts in his draft year when he was drafted, and he was talked about potentially being an underrated prospect. Kind of like Emil Heineman is for the Canadiens as well when he got traded to Calgary. And obviously, these guys are not big name prospects. They're not your Owen Tippett's. They're not your Grigory Denisenko's. They're obviously not your Lindells and Spencer Knight. But I think these are good assets for a team like the Canadiens. You've already got an abundance of players that you've drafted over the years that it look like they could be potential really good players. Well, now you've picked up Ty Smilanic, who, again, not a lot of familiarity with him, but he's a guy that maybe can come into the NHL team. He's 20 years old. Maybe next year, if he's ready to go, or if he's done university, maybe he comes over, plays for Laval, and does well. You don't know what the future holds for those guys, but definitely for Florida, it's been a big move so far. They've done 2 big moves today so far in terms of trading Frank Vatrano and now acquiring Ben Chiarot. Are Florida done? Is this the end of Florida, or will we be talking about them before Monday's trade deadline again? Because I think Florida has been one of the most active teams. Colorado too has been really active. The Rangers look to be active, so things are starting to go down. The domino effect, and obviously Calgary too, who just made a deal, which we're going to talk about soon as well, with Calle Yarncroke. So there's a lot of deals coming, and it's kind of hard for us to manage all this. But hey,
it is insane tonight. Like I honestly, Ben Chiarot was completely unexpected. I didn't think it would happen today.
You literally went.
We literally spoke about it. We recorded. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go eat supper. I'll speak to you later if there's another small trade, whatever. I'm eating, and they're like, "Oh, Ben Chiarot got traded." I'm like, "That's it. We're recording a video." We hopped on right away.
That's it. It's almost like we said it before the video. Like we spoke it into existence. It's like you went to go eat it. Like Ben Chiarot live.
Well, who knows? Maybe and another thing we mentioned in the other video, like who knows? Maybe they were working on a deal for Claude Giroux right now, and it didn't go through. So they're like, fuck it, let's get Ben Chiarot.
According to Eric Engels, or actually according to Pierre LeBrun, they said that the deal was done an hour ago, but they only made the trade call now because apparently there's like a whole process that needs to go into. So
so it was all planned, the whole Rangers.
Yeah, it was already planned out, which is pretty cool. To think about it. But I think if, for the Canadiens, I know that yesterday Brendan Gallagher talked about how important Ben Chiarot was to the move to the team. I still think there's a possibility, and I'm going to ask you this question. Do you think that going into the offseason, if Ben Chiarot's a free agent and he doesn't sign in Florida, does he come back to Montreal? Or do you think that his time with Montreal is officially finished and you won't see him in a Canadiens jersey anymore?
No, I think his time with the Montreal Canadiens is finished, honestly. And I don't want him to re-sign with the Montreal Canadiens either. I feel like, if you're going to get guys like that, they're going to eat up minutes for, young players to potentially make the jump and take some ice time. I'd like to see Norlinder play a lot more next season. Maybe Gooley if he's ready next season. I'm not too sure what the name is. If it's not confirmed that he's signing with the Habs yet, but it's a prospect.
Jordan Harris.
Harris too is a potential, player that could make the jump. Sami Niku. I mean, he's very underrated, and I feel like he's a great defenseman. And I feel like if you bring in Ben Chiarot, I mean, it's going to take away playing time from some of these young kids that you never know what could happen with them. Maybe it could be the next PK Subban. Like, who knows?
I think what's really interesting with this Ben Chiarot trade is, you get your assets now, which is cool, but with Florida, like going into next season, right, they're gonna have a little bit of cap trouble. I mean, they're kind of already in a little bit of cap trouble, but they got to sign, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, which I'm going to check right now, actually in 2 years, not this year, but in 2 years from now, they're going to have to sign Jonathan Huberdeau. And obviously, they've got a big hole now with, obviously, Ben Chiarot coming in. Obviously, they have to get some retained salary. But Florida's going to be an interesting team. They're a good team. I think they've definitely improved with this deal. My question to you is, who won this deal? Who do you think, personally speaking, won this deal right now?
Montreal Canadiens, hands down.
Yeah?
Hands down, Montreal Canadiens. Think of it. You're getting Ben Chiarot.
Oh, Zachary disagrees with you. He says Florida.
Really? I mean, Zachary, if you want to point out, like, why do you think Florida won? I mean, we'll be happy to, argue on that point. But think of it. They got Ben Chiarot for, so far, just the playoffs. It's not confirmed that he's going to resign or anything.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just for the playoffs. No guarantee that they're going to win the Stanley Cup, even though there's some of their, like, favorites. And the Montreal Canadiens get a first-round pick for next year's loaded draft. They have a fourth-round pick, which you can find gems, and we got a prospect. So what's not to lose? If all goes right, we get 3 superstars. If all goes wrong, we get 3 trade pieces that we could trade for something else.
Exactly, and I think, look, at the end of the day, like, even going back to just where we were, like, talking about this before, I personally think the Canadiens win this trade too, and it's not because I don't think Florida's getting a good player. I just think that for the price that you paid, you look at a guy like Josh Manson and what happened with Josh Manson. It's kind of a similar deal in the sense that Drew Hellison, is pretty similar to what Chiarot's getting, but Chiarot gets the first round pick, and the first round pick, especially in a draft next year, that is going to be stacked apparently, especially the top 5. And even if Montreal doesn't get a top 5 pick, they're going to have a draft pick of their own that most likely will be within that range if they suck next year. What's interesting about that is you go and look at Montreal, they've done a really good job in terms of just getting assets. And like we said before, it's just more pieces being added. And obviously, just answering a few comments here, as a Florida fan, I'm hyped for Ben Chiarot. This is from Stonewall. He's saying that. So good for you as a Florida fan to be happy. And obviously they needed a solid defenseman as well. I agree. I think you're getting a really solid defenseman in Ben Chiarot for sure. And then Animal also says his price was at the highest now. Montreal got a great return. And I also agree with that one to an extent. The Canadiens do get a fantastic return. And obviously, just to answer Elio's comment, we're very good. Thank you for asking. Just because I didn't want to leave him out. I was answering everybody else's questions. Didn't want to leave him out. But just in terms of that, I agree. I think, look, Montreal got the best deal they could possibly get for Chiarot, in my opinion. I'm curious to see what the other offers were from other teams. But even just at that, like Animal said, it goes back to Montreal got the highest. The price was at the highest now. He was playing well. He was playing some good hockey. And again, Montreal gets themselves a fantastic deal, in my opinion. So anyway.
Hopefully some other trades might go down tonight or tomorrow.
Well, guys, stay tuned.
Let's keep these videos popping, Well, so thank you so much for watching. Leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe because we're on the righteous path to hit 1,000, as Chris would say. And, see you on the next one.
Guys, just before we go, just stay tuned because we're going to be doing the Calle Yarncroke video in about 5-10 minutes. So stay tuned for that one as well.
Yeah, there you go. We're posting back to back tonight.
We're not going to be leaving. We're going to be coming right back. So just stay tuned.
All right. Ciao.